Hi there, and thank you so much for joining me again. Today, I have an amazing setup before me with not one, but two Okos. And shout out to Make Noise because they did send one of these over, but I bought the other one, so I guess that cancels the shilling out. Anyway, they're sponsoring today's video, and I want to thank them because it's been a real blast getting to dive deep into this little synthesizer. And today I just want to share why I love the Okos so much. It's one of my favorite semi-modular synths out there. Mainly because it's so easy to program and get to grips with, even though its language and kind of architecture is very, very weird because, as the name suggests, it doesn't abide by the rules of either West Coast or East Coast synthesis, and it makes for something fresh and new. But instead of just telling you, I decided, hey, why not show you first instead? So this is a little pattern that I made, being sequenced by the Hapax. The lead melody is being provided by this Okos, using only the internal patching, no cables as you can see. And it's being processed by the Strymon Night Sky. The Novation Peak is providing us with a nice bed of synthesis. OPXY was going to be only drums. And now the second Okos is going to come in. With a nice arpeggiated bass line. One of the things that I really love about the Okos is just how versatile it is and the sheer range that you can get out of it. Because, for example, the Minitar by Moog is an excellent bass synth, but it's limited in the higher notes. The Okos does not have that issue at all. Let me show you. If I go really high on the octaves, I can basically communicate with the K9 community. Yeah, that's pretty darn high. I'm gonna turn off the night sky for a second, see. That's the dry sound. I don't know about you, but usually when I think of the difference between digital synths and analog synths, all the hoopla around that discussion, this is what I think of when I think analog. There's just a pureness to the wave, a slight grittiness there that you don't get with digital. This is just one of those most analog-y sounds, along with the Sub 37 that I've found out there. And let's not forget, we can also do very bassy bass. That is, yeah, that'll rock your speakers. You need a subwoofer for that. Even though this is made to be patched and kind of played in a Eurorack style, it's not really necessary. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of patching with cables, and I'd say that 90% of the time, I'm using the Okos with no cables included because the internal routing or the pre-routed way that this is hooked up is just phenomenal. And you get amazing possibilities that are also very predictable and controllable. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the bridge of the song, but I want to point out one thing that I'm going to do with the lead Okos, and that is I'm going to completely change the timbre by activating the slope, which in more normal terms would be akin to an LFO. And that gives us almost an effect here. I could ramp this up to make it sound almost like a distortion, but I want to give it that wobble. So listen for that change right here on the bridge. Love that. Now, another very cool thing you can do is by just changing the balance of either the overtones or the fundamental, you can make this sound. Let me mute this thing real quick. If I go to the fundamental, it sounds like a sub bass, right? But if I switch over to the overtones, it almost sounds like a lo-fi kind of bass. It sounds huge. Okay. Okay, before I get too carried away, there are a couple of things that I want to mention. The way that you actually shape your sounds is very different than what you might be used to. If you're used to something like the peak or Moogs, you're used to subtractive synthesis. Basically, you get the sound and you start sculpting out harmonics from it with filters, envelopes, and such. Here, however, you do something very different. You start stacking up harmonics. So for example, if I go over here to my lead sound, this overtone knob over here lets me add in harmonics, and this multiplier is also shaping the sound by adding stuff in. Another thing that really draws me to the Okos is that the envelopes and the shapes that I can make with them are completely different than what I'm usually used to with other synths. These little knobs over here make the behavior of these lines go from linear to exponential. So and it can make for some cool timbres or even sound effects if you're looking for that. How cool is that? And what makes it just a doozy for live performance is that you have so much tweakability and so much knob per square inch at your control that you can basically go crazy with this stuff. Now, word of warning, always pitch it before you start playing, because I've had occasions where I forgot to pitch it and I'm in a completely different key and it's kind of gets wacky that way. But if you remember to pitch it before you start, believe me, this thing is going to be a staple in your live performances. So with that said, I'm just going to play you out with this little jam I'm making. I hope you enjoyed this, or this was useful, entertaining, or informative. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a great week. I'll see you next time.